I thought maybe Rabbi Ari Ze'ev could share with us a little bit about what motivated you to write this book. I mean, you heard a little bit about my personal connection to Rav Kook. Rabbi Ari Ze'ev, what motivated you to write this book? Like, I can imagine, first of all, for those of you that haven't yet looked at the book, it literally takes beautiful passages from literally the gamut of Rav Kook's writings. Rav Kook's writings about universal faith. Rav Kook's writing about the sanctity of the land of Israel. Rav Kook's writings about all the different wisdoms of the world. It's a beautiful, beautiful work, and we'll talk about some of those actual quotes and passages throughout the night. But maybe just start us off with, what motivated you to write this book?
So, I guess let me start kind of what Ilan was saying before. I didn't go to religious Zionist yeshiva when I came to Israel when I was 20 years old. I grew up in modern Orthodox schools in Australia. I'm from Australia. You can hear me? But the truth is, I was kind of bored of Judaism when I was about 18. When I finished school, I started studying film and music, and it didn't satisfy what I was looking for either. So when I was about 20 years old, I came on a family trip, and I was invited to this Haredi yeshiva, and immediately found something I was looking for. It was a very deep connection, and I went totally black and white. And not just closed my mind. In some way, I think I found exactly what I was looking for, and in some way I found the opposite of what I was looking for. I found the deep, such passion, such spiritual connection, like fire in the Haredi world. And I was in yeshiva for 8 years in the old city around Jerusalem. But one of the things that used to bother me a lot in those yeshivot is, even though they were so passionate about God and Torah and mitzvot, I felt kind of like restricted, like I couldn't breathe, and also such negativity towards the world. I felt so judgmental. The more religious I became, really like everything was fire. I was burning things up, and my family knows too much about this. Just became, in many ways, very insensitive to the world. And when I was about 23, this is where I met Rav Sam Shor. I got involved in this program, and I guess the reason why I signed up to it was because I didn't think it was religious Zionism. I wouldn't have done that. I was too far away from that world. So what happened was, there was this rabbi there called Rabbi David Aaron, who I adore to this day, both our teachers, and he looked Haredi. He had black and white. So I thought, I guess I can trust him. So, we walk in, and within the first, day, he's teaching Rav Kook, and I'm thinking, why are we learning Rav Kook? We're supposed to be learning something deep and spiritual in this program. I want to be a rabbi. I want to be a spiritual rabbi. Why are we doing Rav Kook? Rav Kook's just going to be about Zionism. I don't want to do politics. So from the beginning, I was shocked that every time he would bring up Rav Kook and we would learn his words, it was about philosophy, mysticism, individuality, creativity, self-expression, peace. And little by little, I started my mind started opening up to the realization maybe I got Rav Kook wrong. Because I'd have heard of him growing up in modern Orthodox schools, but he'd just been the Zionist rabbi. So I assume that just means he talks about the land of Israel a lot, and like Ilan said, right-wing politics. And little by little, my mind started expanding, and I started learning all of these books of Rav Kook. And it really was like love at first sight, in a very, very powerful way. And anybody who knows me at that time, you kind of met me there, but you didn't see me before. Many things started changing about the way I started looking at people, treating my family, treating my body. As I'm gonna show you a few pieces of Rav Kook's relationship to the body, how important taking care of your health is. And so Rav Kook became everything for me when I was about 23 and 24. He speaks about everything. Even my diet started changing. He was a vegetarian during the week. He ate meat on Shabbat. Why did he eat meat on Shabbat? It's a good question. We kind of deal with it in the book. But even I started thinking, well, why do I eat meat? Is it a spiritual value to eat meat, or maybe it's also a spiritual value to be a vegetarian? And I started struggling with all these ethical questions. And then I started teaching in this incredible yeshiva called Yeshiva Oraita, which is Rav David Aaron, Rav Shor were a part of, and I was asked to teach a little bit. So I said, I'm going to teach Rav Kook. That's what I'm passionate about. And within the first year, I had students who said to me, Rav Kook is spectacular. We agree with you. We didn't know he was this good. We didn't know he was this relevant. Can you recommend a book? So I remember taking this one student over to a bookstore, to Mariah bookstore, and saying, here are all the books, pick one. And he said, Rav Ari, I can't touch Rav Kook in Hebrew. He's impossible. It would take me hours to translate a piece. I'm going back to America. So I said, okay, let's pick an English book. So we go to the English section, and there are many, many English books written on Rav Kook, not the first. And he takes a book out, and I remember him looking at me like, it's not any better than the Hebrew. I don't understand anything. And it's not an insult to the translation. They translated the words exactly the way Rav Kook wrote them. And it was very literal, and the translators did a good job of the literal translation. But if it's poetry, and if it's already kind of a very creative way Rav Kook wrote, to translate in a literal way, it makes it harder. And so the student goes back to America without a book. And I remember thinking, if somehow I can start making an independent connection for my students to Rav Kook, I have to start doing it. So the next year, I get asked to teach Rav Kook again. And the first class, I say, you know what? Let's just see if they can do it in Hebrew. Nobody reads the text with me. I have to do it all. I have to paraphrase Rav Kook. So the next week, I'm sitting with my wife at home, and I say, I'm just going to translate a piece. I never translated a piece before. I got to translate a piece. And I pick a very small piece, because he writes these very small, powerful ideas. And the next week, I bring 2 or 3 of these translations. And immediately, the students say, wow, this is so easy to read with you. So then the next week, I translate another one. And this is 7 years of translating later. I have a book, and what would happen is, as I would translate more and more, I would realize, oh my gosh, he speaks about everything, like absolutely everything. Like, there could be a volume 2 of this. And by the way, they keep coming out with more and more translation, more and more of his writings. There's still diary entries that haven't been released. It's like he's still alive.